Hello, my name is Yewande, and I'm coming to you from Johannesburg, from my home in Johannesburg, and welcome to Knitting the Blues. This is a knitting podcast that I'm starting. This is the first episode, and welcome. I have some notes here, incredibly rough notes, just so you see how professional I am. So if I look down, that's what I'm looking at. And my notes say, who am I? I've told you who I am. They say, where am I? I've told you where I am. And it says, why am I? Well, more like, why am I recording this video? Yeah, it's a strange thing. I didn't imagine that I would ever do something like this, just to be frank. I think I want to connect with people. I want to connect with other knitters around the world. I want to talk about something that I'm finding particularly sacred, which is just manipulating threads and different kinds of materials and making things with them. It's been an amazing process for me learning this and doing it for myself and for people around me. And nothing else has moved me to want to connect with people in this particular way before, quite like knitting has. Disclaimer, I do things that hopefully connect with people. So a bit more about who I am. I'm a novelist. I write novels, I write short stories and essays, and some of my books have been published. So this idea of reaching out and connecting with others, in that instance, through the magic of word and storytelling is not new, but that I'm doing it with knitting is a bit sort of left field. But anyway, that's why I'm recording this. I guess I just want to reach out into some physical but also ethereal space and touch that space and kind of say, I see you, and here I am as well. Sorry, can't even read my writing. And as you've heard, I'm a writer. I'm not a medical doctor. Yes, okay. How long have I been knitting? So I really learned to knit when I was quite small, I think. I'm living in Johannesburg, but I grew up in Nigeria, in a town called Ilefe. I recall knitting like in the field of the school I went to. I would have been 6, I think, with a friend, and we didn't have wool, but we were unraveling our sweaters and knitting with what we unraveled, or knitting had like 2 sticks and doing something with the sticks. So I think this idea of working with fabric and using something to make something is not new for me. My mother was a very talented sewist and basically made all my clothes. So all my life, I've been around somebody also who was making garments, this time with fabric. Anyway, there's a whole long story there. The shortest version is that about 6 years ago, when I wanted to have children and I was struggling a bit to fall pregnant, I started knitting. I don't know why. I think a friend of mine started sewing, and so I thought, I've got my mother's sewing machine, and let me see if I can sew. And I ended up sewing a little bit, and then somehow I started knitting. I don't remember precisely, but I started making things for the baby that wasn't arriving at the time. I made blankets, and I was just practicing stitches. I wasn't following any patterns or anything like that. I was just practicing stitches and knits and purls. I still have the blanket. It's just full of these insane stitches that I've probably never used again. Knitting was just a source of comfort, and it felt like this active meditation, around my desire to be a mother, and a way to handle my nerves, because about whether I would become a mother or not, and as a way to expect, and hope. She says to sew is to pray, and I feel the same way. Like, to knit is to pray. Like, there's just something quite sacred about the act. At least for me, and that got me going with the knitting. And then And then I did fall pregnant. I have 5-year-old twins, started making things for them. I bought quite inexpensive wool and made them hats and, just started making things for them. And I sewed a bunch of stuff as well. I sewed all their bed sheets because I said, I'm not going to buy bed sheets because I was like, they overcharge you for that stuff. So anyway, I was also being a bit thrifty, but I think I was also just enjoying using my hands. And then for many years, as my babies were born and they grew, I would make things for them. It was only just under a year ago that something kind of switched in my head and I thought, why am I not making anything for myself? And I started making things for myself. And my goodness, is it, what is the word? I don't want to say contagious. I mean, it is contagious, but it's addictive. I went to a knitting shop the other day and there was this lovely badge and it said, I'm not going if I can't take my knitting. And I was like, yeah, that's me. It's been a little under a year and I've been making lots of garments and accessories and gifts. And I came upon this community online. I don't think I've watched this many hours of YouTube my entire life than in this year where I stumbled on, knitting YouTube and just met knitter after knitter. And you just kind of fall in love with this community and these people and what they're doing and the joy that emanates from this craft. So I have my favorites. I mean, we can talk about that another time perhaps. But I think it's worth mentioning the very first podcast I came across was Easily Knitfluenced. Michelle, I think is her name. And she's wonderful. And I stumbled on one of her podcasts where she was talking about Japanese knitters. And I just loved it. It just captured my imagination and my attention. And then I haven't stopped. I want to do a regular spot, a respectful nod towards Pinterest. We look at each other's pin boards. What are the ideas and explorations rolling around in your head? It might be patterns. It might be something else, a new yarn, an indie dyer you're obsessed with, something in your neighborhood, knitting or fiber arts related, that has captured your imagination, inspired or surprised you. Share with me down below in the comments, for instance, or on email or even Instagram, and I'll feature some of those here and engage with these ideas. And, let's call it the virtual water cooler chat. Did you know? Have you heard? What do you think? I hope you help me fill the pin board. For today, I filled it with a few things on my own mind. For instance, Noma Ndlovu is a local designer that I've been watching and following. She has a podcast. She has many, many wonderful designs. One of her recent ones, I've put a picture here, is this exquisite dress. I mean, I'm not sure I'm brave enough, but it is on, it's there on my mind, on my pin board, and something I'm thinking about and I keep looking back to. I would love to interview Noma Ndlovu for this podcast. Maybe one day I will. Someone else I would love to interview, and I have asked, and she's pretty much agreed, is Mincy of Naughty Habits. I'll talk a bit about her yarn later when I discuss a project, but she has an incredible array of yarns. This one in particular is this mixture of merino, viscose, and linen, and I'm fascinated by it. I've worked with it with two different garments, and there's such a wonderful quality to it. And I wrote to her and I said, could I interview you about particularly this base, and without divulging any secrets, could we talk about, this yarn? Because I love the quality of it. And she agreed. Maybe I'll get to visit her studio and interview her and film some of that interview, and you will get to hear about that on this podcast. Two other things on my pin board is, it's fascinating to me that South Africa supplies, I think the figure is 52% of the world's mohair. And I really want to pick away at that fact and understand how it happened, how these goats happen to be here in this land, because I think it's an interesting story. And I think I'll feature that in a future podcast as well, just to talk a bit about the history of South African mohair. And lastly, as you'll find out, and from the name of this podcast, I love blue, all kinds of blue, but in particular, I think indigo is one of the most amazing colors in the world. There, I said it. And I'm fascinated by indigo itself, the plant, and the dyeing techniques. This particular picture is from the indigo dyeing pits in the north, in Kano, the north of Nigeria, a place I've never visited but would love to. These are ancient pits. I've forgotten how old they are. I think I'll try and put the info up on the board. And I also put the information about the artist, the photographer of this picture that I got from an open source. But wouldn't I love to learn how to do indigo dyeing? I know it's not easy, and I know it would take quite a bit of dedication on my part, but I think I'm ready to be a student and to sit at the feet of, someone incredibly learned. By the way, I've been looking, I live in Johannesburg, like I mentioned, and I have actually been looking for, particularly indigo dyeing, and struggling to find, anyone giving classes, or maybe even online. Of course, you have to do it in person eventually, but even just the technicalities, because there are so many. I've been watching a lot of podcasts on indigo dyeing and just salivating, at people who are doing it, and would love to learn to do it myself. Maybe that's a journey I can bring you along. I can take you along. What am I trying to say? You know what I mean? And maybe that's a journey we can take together, and I can document that process here in this podcast. So there is some things on my Knitting the Blues pin board. What are some things that, just popping up for you, some images, some ideas? Feel free to share them, and I'll check with you first, but I will feature some of those ideas in my following podcast, and I'd love to do it every podcast. Last item on my very professional show notes is what I've made and what I've learned. Some of what I've made and what I've learned. I didn't want to, this is the first date, so I didn't necessarily want to bombard you with everything I've made in this time, but I might do one of those. Those are wonderful videos, the ones I've watched, the wonderful podcasts where they say everything I knit in whatever, 2025. But I thought just for today, a little offering, I would talk about some of what I've knit and what I've learned. And I'm actually going to talk about 3 pieces. I'm looking down in this direction because this is where I've compiled them. These are 3 different patterns that I knit twice. And what I've learned. That's something quite fun. Knitting a pattern and then knitting it again. It's a very common thing in the community, and many people do it. And I thought it feels also being a writer and of course a reader. I always feel like writers are usually readers first. It's this wonderful thing of reading and rereading books that you loved, and this kind of intimacy that develops between you and the writer and the text and the story. So anyway, I wonder if a similar kind of intimacy develops between you and the designer and the pattern, and it's the familiar stitches, or it's the familiar motif, or the familiar lace pattern, whatever it is. And I found that interesting. I haven't knit, have I knit something? Oh, and there's another garment I didn't include here that I have knit twice. Anyway, we can talk about that one another time. I'm trying to think if I've knit anything thrice, and the answer is no. Is the answer no? I think I've knit the odd socks several times because I just love a play. I mean, there's nothing more beautiful than a very dainty, delicate, beautiful sock, but I can't find it in myself to do those just yet. I knit very plain socks. And I love Tin Can Knits for their designs and their basic patterns. Okay, but let me get into it. And let me start with what I'm wearing. Lento sweater. I'll put all the details there, but it's the Lento sweater. But I knit this very early on, I should say. I think it was my first or second sweater. And it's lovely. I knit it in African Expressions, a very thick yarn. It's a merino and mohair blend. But I love short cuffs, so this is not by accident. I don't love too much, mostly because I'm I'm busy, I'm doing stuff, I'm cooking, I'm doing the dishes, and this actually works for me. And even visually, I think I kind of like that aesthetic. Anyway, so that's what I'm wearing. So I'll just get that out the way. Then let me start with the accessory. So you would recognize this. I mean, knitters, you guys would. This is not I don't think it needs lots of introduction. It's hard to show you totally, so I might do pictures if necessary. But this is the Sophie Shawl by PetiteKnit. I bought the pattern some time ago. I love the pattern. Look at this garter. I'm going to try and see if I can. I hope it's showing. I really have no way of telling. But I love that garter pattern. And by the way, knitting the blues, okay, maybe that's what I will end off with, telling you why I've called it knitting the blues. But I mean, the obvious one is because I love blue, the color of my soul, literally. But I love this pattern for its simplicity, its elegance. I'm not really going to do the scarf, that little, I don't know. I mean, it's lovely, but I figure it's not really me. But this I can get behind. Now, I knit this one first. I knit it in Aran Waite Cowgirl Blues, which is a local yarn dyer. They're based in Cape Town. Really beautiful yarn. And it's wonderful, but it's scratchy. And I'm not sure what... I'll talk a bit about what I'm sensitive to. I found that mohair on my skin like this is not really good. Now, this doesn't have any mohair in it, so I don't understand what's scratchy about it, but it is. So my husband, lucky him, he got this because it doesn't bother him. And I very recently, my brother was coming down from Los Angeles where he lives, and I wasn't sure about it, but I'd heard knitters talking about it, so I ordered just one disc of Mancha Lopez in this color, this gorgeous navy color. And I thought, let me just let him bring it. If it's just one, and we'll see. Now, this is weird because it's anybody who knows Mancha Lopez, of course, it's pretty rustic, but it's soft, but it doesn't, for some reason, this is merino, which I love, but somehow, I don't know what it is. The fibers bother me, and this does not. And it's warm as nobody's business. And I live in this. I said, oh God, I'm going to have to make another one because I've been wearing it every day since I finished it. And confession, I didn't block. I didn't block this. Please, if you are very experienced in blocking Mancha Lopez or unspun yarn, send me a word, because I looked online. I wanted a video that specifically talked about blocking unspun. Of course, there's a lot on blocking and there's a lot on unspun. I didn't seem to be able to find anything that talked about blocking unspun. And I love this thing so much, I was just nervous that it would just disintegrate if I put it in the water. Of course, it's not going to. But because of the way that it breaks apart when you're knitting it, I was kind of like, and I didn't want to risk any drama. So I haven't blocked it. Of course, I will eventually, and I know it will be for the better. But I thought I wouldn't block it until I know a bit more about how to do that properly. Because they say don't put it in too warm water, don't put it in too cold water. And I also thought, you know what, I mean, it's fine when blocked. It works perfectly fine for me. Well, and now I'm hooked. I'm now, like, next chance I get to order a lot more Mancha Lopez, I intend to do so. And I'd love to I love fiber tails. I love her things. There's something really delicate and very beautiful about her designs. And I'd love to make some I think there's the Kro, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it properly, shawl. And there are a few other shawls she has. And I would love to make like nice, big, crazy shawl out of Mancha Lopez. But that's okay. But that's a small little lesson just about, how something feels against your skin. And okay, so then let me talk about this next pattern. So there's a pattern called the Twofer tank. Twofer tank. And you'll see all the details on the screen now. Now, this is literally the first thing I made. I decided, you know what, I'm going to make something for myself. And I went, there's a local big store in Johannesburg called Arthur Bales, and they've been around forever, and they're really good and really nice people work there, and they have these big sales occasionally. So there was this big sale, and I thought, okay, let me go. And I didn't want to drop too much money, so I ended up looking I find cotton is often slightly more affordable. I don't know if that's accurate everywhere, but I find the cotton yarn slightly more affordable than the wools. And I found this wonderful cotton yarn with the details on my screen now. And this color, I was drawn to this color. I don't know if I think it's fairly accurately showing up. It's a teal, I would call it. It's washed out a tiny bit, maybe, I don't know. It's a teal and it's hand dyed. You can see the variegation. I didn't do helical knitting or anything like that. I still don't know how to, and maybe one day I'll work that out. But at this stage, it was literally the first thing I was ever making. I found the Twofer tank. I kind of liked it. I liked that it's like two things in one, because you can wear it this way with the straight neck, or you can have the V with the eyelets. And, so there's a pin sticking here. I'll talk about that in a moment. Let me just make sure it doesn't prick me. So here, I just went for it. I made one classic mistake and I didn't have enough yarn, so I had to look and look and look. And so it sat on the needles for a while, and then I finally got the other one. And you can kind of see where that change happened. Again, I don't mind things like that. I don't know. I think it's okay. I think it's a look. But what did I learn? The yarn, I made mistakes in terms of the armhole, and I kind of went much more deeper than I ought to have for some reason, maybe not reading the pattern properly. And as a result, it's pretty low. I'll probably try it on to show you and put the video aside. But it's pretty low and gapey, and you see the bra, and so that's not a look I particularly like. So I haven't worn it that much. The pin is here because I can just take a sewing machine and I just intend to, turn it upside down and shorten the straps so that it sits a bit more firm and closes up a bit better so it doesn't show my undergarments. The other thing I learned, so there are two more things I would say I learned. The other thing I learned is that I'm not a V person. I didn't love it. And when I started turning it and wearing the square neck, I was like, yeah, that's more me. I don't know if it's just about exposure or it's an aesthetic somehow that I prefer the straight neck. So I learned that about myself, and I think I'm right. So I've been following that. I might, discover suddenly and wear something with the V and think, oh my gosh, that's lovely. Why have I been depriving myself of V-necks? And then the last thing I learned is the color. Now this is a beautiful color, and I love blue, but it's not really a color that I enjoy wearing that much. So it's not beloved. You know what I mean? Like the way this is beloved. It's nice. It's obviously a nice poppy color, but it wasn't quite right. And I think that was a very early lesson, which is you go into these yarn shops and you wonderfully assaulted by these beautiful colors and it's just like, wow, and you don't know. But the thing to be guided by, particularly if you're making a garment for yourself, is this a color that you'll wear? So I saw this from across the room in the yarn shop, and I just went to it because it just drew me in. But I needed to have taken a moment and say, hang on, is this a color that I would wear? I do, and I will wear it because I think it's lovely, but it's not something I'll wear a lot. I will wear it, on occasion. But that's my first Twofer tank. Then I had the opportunity to make another. Now, I traveled, I work remotely, and I had to travel for a work meeting, and I was in Amsterdam, and I thought, okay, I'm going to buy some wool. And I went to buy wool, and I went to, which shop did I go to now? I'll put the name here. And I would spend hours agonizing, firstly because, you're trying to get pocket and desire to match. I couldn't spend too much money. Well, forget pocket and desire. I then decided I would get some Cardiff cashmere. I don't know what possessed me. But anyway, I think I just got 2 balls. I think that's all I felt I could afford. I don't think I needed more than 2 balls. And I realized with 2 balls, I could make Twofer tank. I think. If I'm wrong, I'll say so in the little screen if I'm lying. But I think I got 2 balls. 3 maximum. I don't think I could have convinced myself to buy 4. I could now convince myself to buy 4, I think, knowing how remarkable it is. Anyway, so I got in this beautiful, like cobalty blue, I got this yarn and I got a chance to make the Twofer tank again. And I feel like I corrected all the things I had, I was careful about the depth and checking and measuring. And length. And then something that I had fun with is I didn't love the finishings in that first garment, and I thought, how could I change it up a bit? So I made up my own finishings. And I decided to just do garter at the top like that, a little square of garter. I think it's quite sweet. I kind of like it, and I did it at the bottom as well. And and I liked it. I like this. It's been winter now, so I haven't had a lot of occasion to wear it. But yeah, I love the color. I love how it fits. I'll swirl around in a little video and include it just to show you a fit. And that was a fun experience of getting to do something a second time. So that, okay. And then my last for today, maybe I'll do this again. It's kind of a fun, what do you think? It's like a fun little prompt, My last garment is, and this was, I think, the second thing I made after this Twofer. And it's because I stumbled on Kutovakika website, and I mean her blog or her podcast. And at that little podcast she did, or big podcast she did, where she's making her wedding dress, it was very sweet. And I remember watching it and then kind of going down the rabbit hole, finding out more about her and her patterns. And I saw the Salty Days sweater, and it just kind of, it was sort of my first experience of that, like, oh wow, that is really beautiful. I'd love to make that. And so I did. So this is my Salty Days sweater, the first one. For anyone who doesn't know, I mean, she's a wonderful pattern designer in the sense that for many reasons, but one of the reasons is her pattern writing is really quite generous and I feel really tailored to beginner knitters. In that way that I think sometimes maybe if you're super experienced, you don't want all the instructions, but it's so kind of generous and helpful to have that. And she has videos. She has extensive videos for everything and explains everything super clearly. And so this was mostly painless. There was, and if you go onto the Ravelry page, there are a lot of comments about, I've forgotten what the numbered section is, but there's a little problem you can run into that many people run into and that I ran into as well. And then I worked it out. I think I kept fairly detailed notes, and in general I keep detailed notes on my Ravelry page, and I'll put a link to my Ravelry page. So feel free to hang out there. I guess being a writer, I just love scribbling, and it feels like a diary, so I really go for it on the Ravelry page. So it was such a pleasure once I figured that out. And I mean, my favorite part of this is this. It was my first, of course, being my second sweater altogether, it was my first experience of cables. I don't know sorry about the sunlight coming in. I hope it's not bothering anybody. Anyway, well, let me hold it here maybe. But the cables, those kind of leaf cables, I just think they are so exquisite. I knit this out of African Expressions, navy blue. It's a number. It's not a color, but it's navy blue, but it's a number, which I'll put here, and it's their harmony. I think it's their harmony. It's kind of it's really Aran weight. Again, I hadn't learned anything about like, because in my head I thought it was DK, because this is a DK pattern, but it was Aran weight. It is Aran weight, this wool. Somehow got it to work for the most part. This fits, it was a bit snug. I managed to block it when I started learning to block. and it's given nicely. The one little issue I have is that the sleeves are tight. I found the sleeves tight, and I find them a bit short even for me. They're a bit short even for me. And the story with them being tight is I was knitting the sleeves and just following her instructions happily. And she has these decreasing instructions, the decrease instructions for the sleeves. Let's have a look. I just want to show you the little, they decrease all along here in quite a clever way. And I was just happily following her instructions until I realized, this is quite tight sleeves. And I stopped. And I have to say, I don't think I've ever knit a sweater pattern again and followed the instructions for sleeves. This taught me that. This taught me that do your own thing for sleeves. You're good. Do your thing. So, so anyway, whatever. It's a little bit of a blousey sleeve. Not too bad. Very beautiful. The color's my color. But I always had that thing that maybe I'll fix that issue, and I did. So my final project is my Salty Day sweater, number 2. So this I knit in very beautiful local yarn. She's a local yarn dyer. I love the name of this company. It's called Naughty Habits. And this particular base is, let me get it right, it's wool, linen, and viscose. And it's very nice. It's very light, super soft, very light. It's and it's singles. It's not plied. It's just a single. And I held it double. It's 2 different colors. I held double. I held the undyed with the color called sable. And then by holding the 2, because it's, I forgot to mention, it's fingering or even light fingering. By holding the 2 together, I realized I could get quite a nice fabric. And then somehow my head did the math, and I thought, what if I could use that to make another Salty Days? I always wanted to make a Salty Days, another one. When I knit this one, it was so wonderful. I thought, I want to make another one. And I even told Kutovakika, because I had to ask her a question when I was struggling, and she was really great. I wrote to her on Ravelry, and she responded. And I think I wrote and she didn't respond immediately, and then she eventually responded. I said, don't worry, I've sorted it out, and it's a lovely pattern, and I'm definitely going to make another one. And she said, that's so nice. She seemed to like the fact that I would make another one. And then months passed, and I made nothing. So it's also felt good to make good on my promise. It wasn't like a promise, but like my declaration. But I genuinely always wanted to make another because it's so lovely. And I thought, well, this one's pretty warm, so make something a bit lighter for like, spring or autumn or cool summer evenings. Now, what did I change? Let's go through what I changed. I didn't do any of the, there's a lot of, what do they call it now? I want to say skeletal ribbing, but you would know, and I would write it there. It's that, like, I think of it as skeletal because it's like, boom, creates this structure with the ribbing. It's nice, but I just thought, nah, I didn't want something so, I wanted something a bit kind of looser and chiller. So I didn't do any of that. I just, I decided that I would do, what did I do? I would do 1x1 ribbing for the neck, which is what I did. And I did a tubular bind off. And I decided, and then I decided for the bottom, I didn't, when I tuck this in or wear this, I often find this last set of eyelets a little unnecessary. You know what I mean? Like it's a kind of a flourish at the end that if I'm tucking it in, it becomes awkward because it's half poking out, and so I decided I decided to just stop the patterning up here and not go again later down and just end. So what I haven't mentioned, I'm a sucker for ribbing, just normal ribbing. Ribbing, I'm here for ribbing any day. So I thought, so maybe that's why I loved this so much because of this ribbing and because of the ribbed sleeves. But I thought just end with the ribbing. And what I did, and then I debated if to try and transfer it to tubular or still do another do a different ribbing, but this is already ribbing. So I thought, no, this is the ribbing. And then I bound off in pattern. I chose to bind off in pattern. And gosh, I love that so much. And then with the sleeves. With the sleeves, yes, I did not decrease. And this is usually how I end up doing my sleeves these days. I don't do any decreases because I like some space in my sleeves. I don't do any decreases. So I didn't do any decreases. I just started at the top. I just went all the way down. I also decided I wasn't going to do the little flourish with the sleeves here. No, thank you. You know, this is meant to be a much less, like, pretty, but not too fussy. And so I was just going to go straight with the ribbing. And then I'm quite proud of what I did at the end, which is I translated that ribbing into, I found an easy way to translate that 1x2 ribbing, which is what this is, I forgot to mention, into 1x1. I mean, it's not that, by simply purling, let me try and see if I can explain it without sounding like a fool. So it's 1x2 ribbing, right? Knit 1, purl 2. So I just did one row where I knitted 1 and purled 2 together. Knitted 1, purled 2, so that all those purl 2s became a purl 1. And that's how I got it into 1x1, with slightly smaller needles, of course, so that it starts to cinch in. And then I knit it, and I think that's the bulk of my reduction. And then I just knit that for a while, and then I bound off with tubular. I love this so much. It's not warm enough for now, so I haven't been wearing it that much. But I know I'll wear this plenty once summer comes around, or once the weather turns a little bit, and spring starts in September. And you know, it's going in summer. You know, it's airy. It's got that linen and viscose, so it's not just wool, and it's super soft on the skin, very comfortable, and I really look forward to wearing this. And I think that really kind of sums up, you know, what I've got for today, and sums up my very first episode. And I think I'll just end on this note. I've called this podcast, this podcast consisting of one episode, by the way. Let's see if there's some more. But I've called it Knitting the Blues. I feel like, well, for the obvious, I will be knitting a lot of blues. So you will see a lot of blue in what I knit, and mostly blue. But of course, I knit other colors. And then there's just a way in which the craft of knitting is so connected to how I navigate my emotions, my happiness, of course, but also my sadness, my frustrations, my regrets, my desires, my hopes, my prayers. And there's just a way in which I guess Knitting the Blues summed me up and summed up my relationship with knitting. So thank you. Thank you for sitting with me and listening and engaging. Please say hello if you want to, and I really look forward to being able to connect and engage. I will put all the places that I am in the show notes, Instagram. I have a special email called Knit the Blues. If anybody is still into emails, feel free to write. And as I said, I love Ravelry. I love writing there and treating my each project like a little kind of diary for that project. And I haven't done it for every project, but for many I probably overshare more than I ought to. And hopefully see you back here again. For now, really, take care.